There's a lot of movement in the nation's capital, from a new administration and appointments to a sweep of new executive orders and funding question marks. Let's get into it in just a moment. Welcome to another episode of The Route, School Bus Fleet's video and podcast series that keeps you in the know. I'm Amanda Huggett, your executive editor. Today we're going to cover news and trends in the pupil transportation industry. Then we're joined by a special guest to talk about everything going on federally, with student safety, and with the School Bus Contractors Association. This episode of The Route is sponsored by IC Bus. The next generation is here and is ahead of its class. Let's get rolling. Let's start with a brief recap of news affecting the school bus industry. In February, a school bus driver in Washington state made national news for his calm action during a crisis. Stuart O'Leary was driving a high school girls basketball team to a game on Interstate 405 when a projectile piece of metal flew directly through the windshield and struck him in the chest. Here's a brief clip of what happened. Stewart said it knocked the wind out of him, and he never saw it coming. Despite the pain, he never lost control of the bus. With the aid of two coaches on board, they were able to help him steer the bus to the shoulder and call for help. No one was hurt besides the driver, and even he made a quick recovery. Stewart's shoulder is a little worse for the wear, but his spirit never dampened. He was back at work the next Monday. Now, I had the pleasure of talking with Stuart about his experience, so check out the full story with photos and video on our website. Speaking of heroes behind the wheel, School Bus Fleet is thrilled to announce a brand new award series recognizing the everyday heroism of school bus drivers. Our inaugural School Bus Driver Hero Award is now accepting nominations. If you are, or if you know an inspiring driver, please nominate them by June 30th. We'll include the link in the description of this video. There has been lots of other news affecting school transportation, from electric bus deployments to new executive hires and company expansions. Make sure to check out our website to see what's new and what's trending. But for now, let's get into our special interview. Today, I'm joined by Curt Macysyn, Executive Director of the National School Transportation Association. In case you're unfamiliar, Curt and the team at NSTA are an association representing school bus contractors and vendors. They do lots of work advocating for our industry in Washington and have their pulse on government and legislation. That's exactly what he's here to talk about. So, without further ado, here's our interview. Curt, thank you so much for being with us on the route today. I'm really excited to have this talk about kind of everything that's going on in Washington.
No, Amanda, thanks for the invite. Appreciate the partnership that NSTA has with School Bus Fleet, so my pleasure being here.
We appreciate it too. Hey, let's get into we've got a packed agenda, so let's get into it. NSTA has been really busy over these last few months. Take us through what you've been up to. Specifically, I'm a little jealous. You spent some time in Hawaii for your midwinter meeting. What happened there?
Yeah, so it was a really interesting trip to Maui. We had great content, great participation, and it was really an exciting meeting, and was happy to be part of it. One of the things I think was really cool is that we live streamed the presidential inauguration. Now, it was a 5-hour time difference, so that was our breakfast meeting that we went in there, but all the pomp and circumstance and pageantry of the inauguration is something that's really cool, and so we were able to do that. We coupled that with a little presidential history. I was told that the questions were a little difficult, but that's okay. I think people learned a few things that they didn't know about presidential history, and it was a lot of fun doing that. When we do our meetings, generally, we try to embrace the areas that we're in. When we booked the midwinter meeting in Maui, it was still uncertain of the impact of the wildfires on the community. And one of the things that our Awards and Meetings Committee does, as well as our leadership through the executive committee and board of directors, is we look to support these communities. There's a lot of activity around tourism, obviously, in Maui. And so it was good for us to go in there, support the community. And I know that the folks that I connected with on the island were really thankful, that we did that. We had a really interesting lunch presentation. He was a local singer, songwriter, guitar maker. His name was Steve Grimes. People really enjoyed it. He did a Lahaina song that he had written. He makes these beautiful handmade guitars and ukuleles. It's not ukulele, it's ukulele. So he came on stage, talked about songwriting, talked about the process of building a guitar, and we just see the end product. We don't normally realize, and I think this is kind of relative to student transportation as well. We don't see all the stuff that goes into it. We just see the end product of a beautiful guitar, but he kind of walked us through, the entire process. We had some great feedback from Greg Kresge, WRI, on utility engagement with respect to the electric school buses. We had a panel that talked about the challenges in offering student transportation on the Hawaiian Islands, which I thought was a really great panel, so we could empathize with those individuals and hopefully, part with them when it makes sense. So all in all, it was a great trip. We're looking forward to being up in Boston, July 20th through 23rd. I'm going to put a shameless plug in for the annual meeting and convention, but
Please do.
we really enjoy, the networking, the embracing of the local areas that we're in, as well as the professional development content that we've been able to successfully achieve.
And, okay, so your annual meeting is coming up in Boston in July. You also, before that, you have your Capitol Hill bussin', and you've got your driver competition in Austin. Can you give us some sneak peeks?
Yeah,
What's
no
in the
rest
work?
for the weary here over at NSTA. So our Capitol Hill Bussin' is coming up March 26th and 27th. A lot of great activity, for us in DC. We're looking to make permanent the under the hood exemption that we had successfully applied for with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So looking to get that being permanent, which would be a congressional action that we're going to move forward with the Driving Forward Act. So we have our sponsors set up for that. And then we want to really do a deep dive into the whole issue of illegal school bus passing. We
Mhm.
know uh, that this is an issue that's risen to the level of being an epidemic around the country.
Yeah.
Our partners over at NASDIPS do a great job of culling some survey information. We use that a lot. We know what's out there. It's not anything I think we need to study further. We're looking for some action, and the
Yeah.
tangible action we want is a public service announcement similar to Click It or Ticket. When I'm driving around the
Mhm.
Jersey Shore in the summer around Memorial Day, that is all I'm hit with is Click It or Ticket. It's on signs, it's on the radio, it's on television. It is literally everywhere. And that's kind of what
Mhm.
we want at the back to school period. The survey results that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration did around illegal school bus passing, I think tells you everything you need to know. When people were given a question about their perceptions around why people pass a school bus illegally, the top answer, 30.5%, was don't care. And that's a really scary answer. So not that I'm excusing any of the other answers, like in a hurry, didn't know the law. I'm not excusing those. But intrinsically, those make more sense to me than don't care, especially when it relates to kids. So we got to address this. We got to address it head on, and we have some solutions that we're offering.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, there's been a lot of talk about this being probably the biggest safety issue in the industry. I'm grateful that there's some companies offering unique solutions in terms of technology to address it. And some states are enacting tougher legislation to, penalize offenders. But dig in a little more to what exactly you're doing. You talk about this national campaign. What will that look like? When might it come out? Is there any more pieces that you're watching?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to, have the bill passed, and then it'll take some shape. But we want a campaign similar to Click It or Ticket, and hopefully somebody as creative as they were with that campaign can
Yeah.
roll something out similar around back to school and the school bus and children, and just get the attention of the general public around this issue. I think there are things that are kind of factoring against us. One is that there's kind of less and less driver's education that's going on out there. And
Mm,
so your younger drivers may not even be aware of the specific parameters of how they should act around the school bus. I know that there were 5 or 6 scenarios that NHTSA did within their study, and you can just see that, kind of a standard thing where a vehicle is approaching a school bus from the rear, stop arm extended. Most people knew stop and stay there. But as we change some of the variables like divided highway, 2 lanes, school driveway, you started to see the answers kind of go all over the place as far as people's knowledge of what they need to do. So I thought that was interesting and just kind of spoke to, the fact that we've got to reach people, where they are. Everybody's busy these days, but where they are and have them understand, because the statistics just show us that the children are more at risk outside of the school bus than they are actually inside the school bus. And so this is why this is the top safety concern of the industry at this point.
yeah. We'll go ahead and link that study in the comments or in the description for this video so folks can read up a little more on that.
Yeah.
Um, let's move on to, I guess, one of the big elephants in a lot of rooms right now is kind of what's going on federally. There's a new administration in Washington. There's probably still more questions than there are answers. New priorities, wave of executive orders. But what's your take on what's going on? How it will affect our industry, and what are you watching most closely?
Yeah, all great questions, Amanda. I always look at, and I've been doing this for a number of years, like all elections is an opportunity. And this one certainly has the feel of a transformational election. I don't think anyone could disagree that Donald Trump um, was elected as a disruptor of how the status quo in Washington. So we're all going to keep an eye on how that affects our specific industries, and school transportation is no different. One of the areas that we're keenly watching is the ability for people who've had grants approved under Clean School Bus, that are they going to be able to draw down their money eventually and get those buses delivered. The other stuff too with the public service campaign that's going to cost money. Got to see how that works within the confines of what the budget deliberations are going to be, in DC. And then the appointments are always key. I know Sean Duffy is over at the Department of Transportation. Um,
Mhm.
they house both NHTSA and FMCSA, which are great partners for our organization. So looking forward to seeing who are the people who take positions in those agencies, which will be key to us. We've already had communications with Administrator Zeldin over at the EPA, but I have to tell you, like, and going back to like the COVID days, we are just engaging with a lot more in terms of agencies overall in DC. I would just tell you, like, during COVID, never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would be testifying before the CDC, which is exactly what happened. they're arguing for us to be considered essential, our bus drivers to be considered essential employees in that mix during COVID. So I think it's a wise lesson that always be prepared to engage, not just with your typical industry partners, but really those rules and regulations can come out from anywhere, and you just want to be sure that you've given input to support your industry.
So when we look at funding specifically, and you touched on this briefly, but some schools are having some fear about, will those funds come through in this latest round? Will the buses get to them in terms of both the clean heavy duty vehicles and clean school bus? And others are saying we're not really losing the funding, it's just shifting to the states. But where do you land on this? What do you foresee?
Well, obviously, we're going to be supportive of programs that will assist our operators in getting electric buses, whether that be at the federal level or at the state or local or utility level. So I've seen all of these programs in play. I think the one thing for us as NSTA that we keep a keen eye on is the fact that any of these resources should be available to both public and private entities providing student education. So there were some cases where Volkswagen monies being deployed at the state level did not allow for contractor access to that. In fact, the first round of clean school bus money did not have direct contractor access. And NSTA changed that law so contractors had direct access. Outside of the obvious and saying, well, you're just supporting your members. Well, yes. But the other part of that too is in terms of being able to control cost for these programs, it is better to have a contractor there shopping price on buses than it is to have that those monies go directly through individuals who are not going to be concerned about being wise and taking a look and maximizing the potential of these dollars. So we're able to do that. So we think it works best when we're on the front lines of that. And, we have an eye on the state programs. I will say this. If states have mandates, and New York comes to mind specifically about school buses, then I think it's an obligation of that state to step up to the plate and provide funding for it. If you're going to, if you're going to pass the mandate, then you've got to give the resources, to the either the operators or the school districts to make this happen. So I think this election, this is the first time really that student transportation funds outside of special ed have been kind of a federal thing. So the program was good. We support the program. I don't know its future, but a lot of the activity, I think, as you allude to, is going to be done at the state and local levels moving forward.
Yeah. Let's look at legislation now. Are there any specific bills or efforts so far that you are tracking or that you hope to see happen in this next year?
Yeah, that's always an interesting dynamic because state legislatures are in such a state of flux. Like I talked to somebody from Pennsylvania this week, and they have a one legislator margin, like in their legislature. Minnesota is actually not meeting because I think the legislature is in a flat out tie, and they can't get together and appoint leadership. So they're not actually meeting. So it's like this stuff that we've never seen before, at the state level that's going on. But one thing I think is bubbling to the surface, and it's something we're definitely keeping an eye on, and that's alternative student transportation. Now, once again, our position at NSTA is the school bus is the safest form of transportation for students to and from school. That is without question. So if we move to other forms of student transportation, whether that is, and they're called non-conforming vehicles or drivers without CDLs, what are the
Mhm.
safeguards that the states are going to put in to ensure student safety?
Yep.
And I think the danger is that we've heard of the driver shortage. And if we just kind of bypass the idea that, okay, well, we have a driver shortage because we can't get enough CDL licensed drivers, so we're just going to skip that part of the transportation continuum, that really hasn't solved the problem. That is just kind of created this alternative method that, and if it happens, we need to ensure that the students are being a top priority in terms of safety and security.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we are a few months into 2025 already, but if you look at the rest of the year, what trends do you think we will continue to see unfold that we haven't touched on yet? What do you think is the next big thing?
Yeah, I think it's a blank canvas as far as what's going to go on in Washington, D.C. I think there's a lot of, positioning that's going on. At some point, the administration, the Republicans and Democrats will settle into their positions. Hopefully, we would see a reconciliation bill where perhaps we can put the Driving Forward Act into that. Perhaps we can put the illegal passing initiative
Mhm.
in that. So I'm looking forward to, because reconciliation is something that can be utilized when the same party holds the White House in both houses of Congress, and that's what happens. The unknown factor is the margin in the House is so slim. President Trump nominated Elise Stefanik, House member in New York, um, as the UN ambassador. She's going to have to resign the seat. The thing with the House seats is they're filled by special election, whereas the U.S. Senate seats, Marco Rubio's seat has already been filled, and that's a gubernatorial appointment. So the different process there with the slim margins, and I just don't think, the minority party is going to give an inch um, to the majority party in this situation. So that slim margin may, come into play. It also comes into play in a body that large. People's health comes into question once in a while. So people are sick or they have surgeries or, there was one member of Congress I saw. She actually had a baby this week, and then she was on the House floor giving a speech with her baby
Yeah.
there, which was, and I think that's the first time that ever happened, if I'm not mistaken. So you see some, unique things, but I think the slim margins that we see at the federal and state level really emphasize for groups like ours the need to be bipartisan and the need to effectively work with both sides to get our initiatives done.
Yeah. Okay, Curt, let's end on a fun one.
All
You've
right.
been hosting your podcast, The Bus Stop, for a few years now. Do you have a favorite guest or favorite topic or a key takeaway, something that's really stuck with you from your interviews from all this time?
Yeah, the podcast has been really fun, and I think about our infancy doing that, and like the first few, and it's like, boy, I don't know if I'd listen to this, but thankfully we've gotten better over time. The interesting thing, I think, Amanda, is I've had lot to work with in terms of so many interesting people, in student transportation. Couple of the highlights: we do a Women in Transportation celebration of Women's History Month every March. I've had, people like, Karina Noble on it, Claire Miller from First Student. I just, we're going to get Rachel Lane from STA on the podcast this year. We've done it with Linda Neff of Keystone, and that's been a great series. And think it highlights the the strong and so professional women that we have in student transportation who've been able to um, really be mentors for a lot of folks who come out like as a young person. You're maybe not sure unless you like with a legacy company But if you're not, so if it's not a family business, like the stories that we get about how people have entered student transportation from being teachers, nurses, we've seen people, and the people I'll give you a great example. Brooke Garcia went
Yeah.
4 seasons in Canada, went from being a driver to the owner of the company. It's like a lot of great stories. So I like that one. I remember GP Singh from Bike Curve was a great guest. He talked about traveling to school in a rickshaw when he was back in India, and how like he evolves, and he's such a dynamic, transformational technology figure in student transportation down there. We have like Dan Cobuson's Rah team from Cobuson Buses, who do a lot of great activity to attract drivers there. We've had Julia Caesar from Cook, Illinois, really knows the nuts and bolts of recruiting drivers. On the podcast, there's just been, so many. We've had Senator Todd Young on the podcast from Indiana on it. We had the late representative from Indiana, great supporter of student transportation, Jackie Walorski, on the podcast. And so it's been a great run. Kurt Warner, a Hall of Fame running back, who was our keynote speaker in Pittsburgh, on the podcast, went to Penn State University, third overall draft pick by the Seattle Seahawks. He was a great, podcast guest. So it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. I've gotten to know a lot of people a little bit better. And it's something that thankfully is just going to continue, because the number of people we're able to reach out to, and the number of new podcast guests just increases every year. So we're thankful for that.
Yeah. Well, that was way more than one, but that is okay because I know there's so many good moments from that show. Thank you for spotlighting it. We will link that below as well. Curt, this was really great. Thank you for sharing a lot today. Is there anything else you haven't touched on that you want our viewers to know, or any last minute plugs you want to get out there?
I think we glossed over the safety competition, but that is coming up in Austin, Texas again. Thanking our partners at Hayes CISD for opening up their tremendous facility for this. We're at the Austin Marriott downtown. That's June 28th and 29th. If you have a local or regional safety competition, you're not on our mailing list, you need to get on our mailing list so we can get you information and communicate. Info@yellowbuses.org is where you can get that info. And looking forward to building on our great event. It was the first time we had a safety competition in 5 years. And so we're just excited to build on that success of last year.
Yeah, can't wait. Awesome. Curt, thank you so much for sharing everything that's going on with NSTA and student transportation in general. It's always an honor to have you on the show, and we appreciate the partnership too.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
Yeah, and viewers, I want you to check out Curt's NSTA's column in the magazine every month. Dan Cobuson's column, rather, the president of NSTA. It's in every issue of School Bus Fleet. So, Curt, thank you again. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Curt, and please check out the links below to see the resources that we mentioned. That's it for today, but you can find more school bus headlines and hot topics on our website anytime. Be sure to follow our YouTube channel and connect with us on social media. And a big thank you to the sponsor of the route, IC Bus, proudly offering vehicles and solutions that are ahead of its class. Thanks for riding with us.